I'm now going to hand over to Penny Young, who's going to talk to us about the future of demographic statistics from the UKSA Board perspective. Penny is a board member of the UK Statistics Authority and was formerly Librarian and Director General of Information Services at the UK Parliament. Thanks very much, Penny.
Thank you, Nicola. I think I just need to get wired up. Thank you very much. And thanks, Steve. That was such an interesting presentation, actually. And one change you didn't mention, I could just about see it from where I was if I squinted, was having to pay £11.70 for the General Household Survey publication. And that shows a change in a sense that now, as long as you've got access to the internet, just how freely available information is now. And that £11.70 must have been quite a lot in those days, because yeah, 1981. So there you go. Right, okie doke. I should, as Nicola says, I'm a non-executive director on the UK Statistics Authority, and I'll just say a little bit about what we do on the Statistics Authority. But I really want to start by saying I really am delighted to be here today and to have this opportunity to discuss our perspective. I should acknowledge, it feels strange not to acknowledge that it's quite a difficult time for ONS and the UK Statistics Authority at the moment. We've had the Devereux review of ONS, and we've had a couple of quite gruelling Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee hearings in the last couple of weeks. But the reason I actually mention that is because, of course, when these sorts of things happen, actually it means that you're not getting the spotlight on all the really good work that's carrying on and all the good people that are doing the most tremendous amount of fantastic activity. And I think we can all agree that ONS has got a great track record in conducting censuses, in developing really pioneering approaches in improving population statistics. So it's great to be able to sort of talk about where we might be going next. So the focus of my discussion today is very much going to be on the vital place of demographic statistics in the life of the nations. It's about, of course, and I don't really need to tell this audience about how important it is in terms of decision making, research and analysis, but also sort of that sense of culture and identity. It really does describe who we are. And if I can just sort of share three different types of examples that strike me, maybe slightly different ones. I've always been struck by the analysis on the benefits, and obviously there's a lot of assumptions go into the quantification of the benefits of a census, and I won't just be focusing on the census, but actually a half of the financial benefits come in the commercial sector. And I think we can often forget that, just about how important it is to the economy and the growth. So that's one example. In my past life as the Commons Librarian, which is very much a research institution as well as a traditional library supporting MPs, one of the really big things that's happened over the last decade is making much more information freely available to everybody. And one of the really exciting things is the constituency databases. So really getting all that data at a constituency level so that MPs, their staff, but also the wider public can really understand what's going on in their constituency. So that's using population statistics material. And finally, just in terms of actually, people being interested in this sort of thing on the ground, I was having a conversation with a gym instructor who'd been struck by, so I live in the Brecon Beacons, and he was struck and I was struck by life expectancy figures and just how poor it is in Bryn Mawr. And unsurprisingly, how much, because it's true of lots of different parts of the country, how much better it is if you just go 5 miles up the road. And we all sort of understand the reasons for that. But as a gym instructor, he was really interested in what he could do, for example, in some talks that he was going to give to schools to encourage kids in areas where did have poor life expectancy as to what they could do and the importance of exercise, and him really thinking about it in terms of his own job. So that's just an example of kind of from the micro to the macro as how important population statistics are. So the future of the system, understatement, is therefore massively important. Really what I want to do in this session is just share our perspective on the UK Statistics Authority Board about what we've been worried about, the things that we will remain concerned about, and therefore how important it is in terms of continuing the conversation with users, as Steve says, as decisions get taken, and as Ollie said, as decisions get taken over the coming years. It does cover the census recommendation, but the future and the present is obviously about much more than the census, capital T, capital C. And one thing just to remember, again, Ollie said it, that the recommendation has been published, but the government hasn't yet responded. We are hoping for a response before the summer recess, so fingers crossed. Just a tiny bit about the role of the UK Statistics Authority. The Act in 2007 set up the authority, and obviously statistical governance has changed over time. But our objective is promoting and safeguarding the production and publication of official statistics that serve the public good. We have quite an unusual arrangement. We have the board, which I sit on as a non-executive, and then we have our executive production arm, which is the Office for National Statistics, and we have the regulatory arm, which is the Office for Statistics Regulation. And we're responsible on the board for oversight and challenge of both arms of the authority. So in practice, that means we are supporting and challenging ONS as it develops population statistics, including the census. And it also means, with other hats on through the regulation committee, that there will be assessment decisions of the development of the system and the census. We've already heard about some of the key milestones along the way, and I think it's just helpful to just be reminded of some of these. So, I mean, and actually you could have picked different dates here, but in 2014, which is, to state the obvious, over a decade ago, Francis Maude, then in the Cabinet Office, in response to a select committee which basically said it's too soon to scrap the census, and obviously this was all around the time of the last recommendation, very much said that he and the government expected the 2021 census to be the last traditional census as we know it, that he thought it could all be replaced by administrative data, it would be more timely, it would be more cost effective, and so on. And as time went on, that certainly informed what ONS were doing, and it also, there was a lot of investment behind about developing population statistics with administrative data because of that, because of the context there. In 2021, of course, we had the last census, although 2022 in Scotland. Then 2 years ago, ONS did the consultation on the future of population and migration statistics, which was at that point thinking, as has already been said, that it may well be possible to do it all through administrative data, and would we actually need one? So that was a lot of healthy responses to that. The board expected just over a year ago to be publishing the response to that and the recommendation, but then the general election got called and things slowed down enormously, hence why we have only just published the recommendation in June, which I will be just going into in a little bit of detail. In between then, we had Denise Leasley did a review of the authority, and one of her big recommendations was that there should be a statistics assembly every 3 years. Some of you might have been at that or seen about it. And the census and the future of PopStats was a really important part of that. And it was very clear that people's concerns and issues were very much the same as in the consultation, which also echoed what the board was sort of concerned about, which I will be sort of taking you through, hence the recommendation that we have published. So just a couple of other points here in terms of the context. You know, we've talked about the historical context. Worth saying that ONS conducted a very successful census in 2021. The data was out much faster. Obviously, of course, it was online first. Amazing response rate, 97% overall. I mean, you know, whenever I see that figure, I just kind of re-experience that, like that is amazing, 97% of the population responding. And ONS has obviously been continuously developing and investing in improving population and migration statistics using admin data, and has had real success. whether it's the mid-year population estimates that are still, in terms of official statistics, in development, or obviously using admin data in terms of international migration. So we are in a very different position, kind of in terms of the evolution of the system. Equally, it's been clear all along that users get the potential benefits, would like more timely data, can sort of understand that, but have always very much been concerned about the maturity of the system and whether an admin-based census could deliver enough and in time. So just in terms of operationally, would it be possible in time? So real concerns about that, which the board has very much heard. We set ourselves, actually this is quite a long time ago, but helpful to have some principles that endure. So before my time, I should have mentioned I've been on the board for just over 2 years. So the board's criteria for evaluating decision making has been around that the plans have to be supported by users as meeting core user needs. So clearly we always need to understand, well, what are the core user needs in order to be able to assess that? It needs to be flexible and resilient enough to respond at pace to future and emerging user needs, because of course things change a lot over time. And really important as well that the methods and approaches have to be peer reviewed and compliant with legislative and ethical considerations. And the plans have to be accepted by the public. Clearly the census is, and hopefully remains to be, one of those things that actually there's a huge amount of public support for. I think if you decided not to do a census, the public would, I'm sure, have a kind of a view about that. You also need to understand the public's views in relation to administrative data, and as you'll know, there's been and ONS have done research on this, as have others, that really over quite a period of time, the public's view has remained quite constant, which is that they think that administrative data should be used for public good. They obviously have concerns about who is using it, how it's kept and so on. But the really interesting thing is they sort of assume it happens already. They think government is far better at sharing data than, frustratingly, it is. That's the public perspective. So in practice, the board's questions and issues when we've been discussing it have been pretty consistent. And for those of you that have responded to the consultation or were at the Stats Assembly, this won't be particularly surprising. So the first thing that we've been constantly worried about is the flow of administrative data. If you are reliant on others for your data source rather than collecting it yourself, there are obviously risks there. Is it going to be secure? Is it reliable? Is it the sufficient quality? And clearly you don't control it in all sorts of ways, so it's much more problematic. And the history of different initiatives in terms of realising everybody's ambition to be able to use admin data as well as we'd like. Everybody gets the potential, and governments of different colours have always said, importance of data, imagine what we could do with it, really helpful for all sorts of things. But then, as I say, getting government's departments to actually share it is much more problematic. So flow of admin data, a real issue. Obviously, how you get the information on characteristics and sections of the population that are not well covered in admin data, because that's obviously one of the huge values of a traditional census. I realise there's no such thing as a traditional census, it kind of changes every time. The need for information from users by relatively small geographic areas. The importance of being able to have coherent estimates across the UK, even if things are done differently, that you're able to get coherence, and obviously being concerned about the future needs of family and social historians. So in practice, those have been the sorts of issues that we've been concerned about, which is why in terms, I should just say, it's one thing I should have put on my slide, but I didn't, is that the whole kind of governance mechanism has a lot of advisory committees. Some of you will be familiar with those, and their concerns were really helpful in terms of them critiquing plans throughout the whole process. So MARP, the Methodological Assurance Review Panel, which is chaired by Bernard Silverman, were concerned about all sorts of things, but one of the things absolutely was the supply of administrative data and, of course, the quality. They've always felt that ONS has very good methods at its disposal, but ultimately was also concerned about the supply of data. The Inclusive Data Advisory Committee, advising the National Statistician, also very bothered about really stressing the importance of protected characteristics. It's really important that the system can give you really high quality information on people with protected characteristics. And then the Data Ethics Committee, chaired by Helen Bowden, have already kind of alluded to this, concerned about the public acceptability of the use of administrative data. So the board and ONS have benefited from a lot of expert input as well. So the recommendation is very much about do a census, but carry on really developing administrative data and what it can do. So specifically, 3 recommendations. The first being that there should be an England and Wales census in 2031. We've talked about the, obviously, in Scotland and Northern Ireland, it's the different, the different bodies recommending that, but everybody is talking very closely. And the critical thing here, it's just worth ourselves reminding what a traditional census is, that it's a mandatory questionnaire-based census of the whole population and housing. So that mandation is a really important feature of a census. Thank you, Nicola. Secondly, second recommendation, that the UK government commission and resource the ONS, continue to resource administrative-based population and migration statistics. So you really don't want to take your foot off the accelerator. You really want to carry on developing all the really good work that ONS has done. And then finally, a very specific recommendation on committing to the flow of critical administrative data. So really pulling that out and saying, ONS can only do so much. You government have to make sure that you provide a commitment to regular, reliable and ongoing flow of the critical admin data sets required. So that's a really important part of the recommendation as well. So just 2 final slides. So in summary, the Authority Board has endorsed the National Statistician's advice on the future development of population and migration, should say statistics, in England and Wales. When I was going, that's my missing word, my typo. Secondly, that the board believes that this recommendation is aligned with the needs as expressed by a wide range of users at different times, most recently in the Statistics Assembly, and that we're really excited that the census in 2031 will combine the traditional value of a census with the increasing power of administrative data in terms of timeliness in particular, but also, and there's obviously a whole big question that's already been alluded to about the various ways in which admin data can be used in terms of both at the whether it's about coverage, whether it's about particular topics, whether it's about imputation, and I think there's going to be, that's going to be a really interesting thing about how does admin data precisely end up being used in the census and then in an ongoing way. Finally, so the recommendation is obviously the easy bit. There's an awful lot to do. I see Jason has just come in, whose broad shoulders are leading on this at the moment. So in terms of mobilising everything that needs doing, obviously topics and the topic consultation is going to be a really important thing that comes up. I've already mentioned the extent of the use of admin data in the census. And one thing I haven't got on there is response. 97% is a tough act to follow, and obviously we're also very much looking, of course, at what happens at individual local authority levels as well. What's going to be an acceptable level? What's going to be done? How is admin data going to be used there? So I guess response is something that one feels nervous about in relation to the 2031 census. One thing you just might be interested in, obviously there's a huge amount of governance around any major programme. One thing, and including external assurance, one thing that we will be adding to this is a focused subcommittee of the board, which will be inviting key experts onto this as well, and key stakeholders. So trying to keep it manageable. It's not going to be the only thing that, only part of governance, but really to advise the board on progress, not just about the census, but the full population statistics system. And I just feel I have to say that caveat again, that the decision to call the census rests with ministers, and we haven't yet got the response to the recommendation. So I shall pause there. Thank you very much.